Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Black Book Thought Leaders Speaker Series. The theme for today's edition is the sharing economy's tryst with real estate. The sharing economy has impacted almost every sector known to man, and the real estate sector is no exception. We've all seen the sharing economies dance, as it were, with commercial real estate through the likes of WeWork and other co-working spaces that have sprung up in the city. Residential real estate seems to be sprinkled with sharing economy magic dust by the way of short-term and extremely short-term rentals, and more recently co-living spaces in cities like Bangalore. In today's session, we will explore the sharing economy's tryst with real estate as we converse with Mr. Amarendra Sahu, who co-founded Nestaway Technologies in 2015 with the intention of addressing the discrimination that was prevalent in the home rental market. Mr. Sahu is passionate towards being a social change maker and aims to develop a social infrastructure for affordable rental homes. An IIM Bangalore graduate, Mr. Sahu is an alumnus of Cisco, Juniper Networks, and Alcatel-Lucent. He also co-founded Brisk TV, a content delivery platform, in 2009. Mr. Sahu is the recipient of several prestigious awards. He was awarded and featured in the Economic Times 40 Under 40 in 2017 for his commitment towards solving rental housing problems in India, and the Fortune 40 Under 40 for his excellence in entrepreneurship consecutively for 2 years in 2018 and 2019. He was also recognized by the Odisha government and was conferred with the Bhumi Ratna International Award. For those of you who are not too familiar with Nestaway, it is India's fastest growing managed home rental network that attempts to provide better rental solutions via design and technology. Nestaway aims to make finding homes more accessible and simple by providing furnished homes and additional services. They work tirelessly to address the issues of young migrants who are discriminated against for various reasons and hope to bridge the gap between the youth and the older generation while finding common ground and making rental relationships mutually beneficial. Mr. Amarendra Sahu, welcome to the Black Book Thought Leader Speaker Series. You've spoken extensively about the residential rental segment. It was unorganized a segment previously. You saw a huge opportunity and obviously, commenced and, started Nestaway. For the benefit of this particular audience, can you share with us some instances or anecdotes that triggered the path, to put Nestaway on the map?
So, multiple ones. I came to Bangalore in 2004, and I hail from Orissa, and I think I had the best job in town back then. I had an offer from Bell Labs, which was into cutting edge research and all that stuff. That was my first interaction. I have never lived, I come from a small village in Orissa, so own house, schools, and then hostels, college hostels, and then you land in a city. And for the first time, I saw that people can tell no to you, that they wouldn't rent homes to a particular gender, particular marital status, and people from a particular part of India. So I got rejected on all the three: male, and then unmarried, and then coming from a state which is known for fish, or let's say the next to West Bengal, which is known for fish. So I actually didn't know, and they said that no, sorry. So I was looking for a house in Koramangala. My office will be nearby, and I was told no, sorry, will not rent your house. But then, if you really want it, we will charge a year worth of rent as deposit. This is my day one. I do not have money, salary, and all that stuff. So that was my first interaction with it. But I sort of just moved on because I had a job to take care. It was the first city. I didn't want to get started on these fights then. And then somehow that problem sort of disappeared from my memory. Fast forward 10 years, 2014, when my sister came, I almost anticipated that was the one-off issue, and it'll either it is non-existent or it would get auto cured. 10 years is a long time, and the same incident repeated again. So I was like, why do why do why don't people do something about it? Like, why it would be this way? We on one hand side talk about all this youth being the asset of the nation, demographic dividends, and all that uh, pep talk. But on the other side, we fail them something as basic as providing safe accommodation. So that was two incident. Another thing happened that one of my friend who was relocating to US came to my house one day and threw the key on my bed and told me, "Hey, Amar, figure out something with it. I just can't deal with it. I will be in a different time zone. I just don't want to look at it. If you can't, just keep it closed. And once in a while, just send somebody to see if the house is intact, right?" And I saw the other side of the problem wherein owners are deeply inconvenienced in managing a rental house. And I thought they're using deposit as a proxy for good behavior tenants. They don't know. Unfortunately, the regulatory systems in these countries are so poor that when things go wrong, there's actually no recourse other than spraying and going from pillar to post. So people are taking things onto their own hands and sort of based on their understanding of the world are creating proxies like people with a particular religion are more risky, single guys are more risky. So everybody is trying to do a risk mitigation. So what felt like discrimination sort of got changed in my head at least to a problem of risk management for owners. And it's a large market, so I thought something should happen. And that's
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? The decades have passed, but the mindsets really haven't changed. And as is always the case when someone tries to find a house to rent, right? It's always the real estate brokers who have been the go-to individuals, right? You find a place, look for brokers down your street, give them a call. But when, of course, you entered the fray in January 2015, you changed the whole game, as it were, right? Uh, you started telling people that you can rent through us when we won't necessarily charge you a deposit, right? Although that sounds exciting, it probably wasn't all that easy to convince people, right? So talk to us briefly about how you convinced your first customer or the first set of customers.
Yeah, I would believe the honesty of a purpose convinces people. See, in India, what I've realized is that most people are good in this country. The issue is what do you tell them when you meet them? What do you tell them? Do you tell them that, sir, I will make you a ton of money, and do you show them the moon, or do you talk a real story saying that, look, I will take care of your house, and I am a person of this background, so hopefully you can believe that I will not cheat. And as such, rental yields in India are low, so it's not that by renting it yourself or via a broker, the world is going to change for you financially. Why wouldn't you want to do a good thing as long as the risk of the system is low? So we said that. So there are two risks that owners spoke to us about, saying that if the tenant damages the house, what happens? And if he does not pay rent, what happens? And I said, if the tenant damages the house, I am offering you an insurance that will make good if the house gets damaged. And if they don't pay rent by 30th of the month, we pay you. So I am not trying to just connect to people. I am also putting my skin in the game. And there is no reason why you should not trust me. Uh, and all I believe is the integrity and honesty of purpose are very essential. Like authenticity to me is a very core tenet of entrepreneurship. And when people talk about getting the early customers, I think if you're authentic, you will get it. I think rather than being fancy and all that stuff. So I was super authentic that I want to solve this problem because of this reason. This is my background, and this is how I plan to solve it. I uniquely understand the risks that the downside of this association, and here are my ways of reducing it. And people agree.
Mention authenticity and trust building because needless to say, these are the bedrocks of offering products and services. And over a period of time, of course, you've built a fairly large customer base, over 72,400 customers, 13 cities in the country. I would imagine that you have a set of happy customers as well as a set of customers who are disgruntled, who take to Quora and YouTube, find you or interviews on YouTube and drop a comment saying, hey, Nestaway's service isn't that great. So it's a tough act for you to balance. So talk to us a bit about the challenges that you've faced, challenges when acquiring the first set of 1,000 customers and challenges thereafter.
So let me divide this into two parts, right? So let me talk about this online hate, right? In general, I guess what happens is that so the hate that you see is of 1% customers. The trouble of this country is that happy customers are silent, like you and me, right? I think we move on with life. I think the culture of thank you is super absent in India. What I mean is that people, and this has been perhaps to do with our cultural aversion towards businesses, right? So what we think that if you have paid them, they are supposed to do the job good, and when they do their job good, we don't owe them a thank you because we have paid them. And here are another set of customers in that universe who are who, for the lack of a better word, are trained in different ways, right? Saying that, and this is just true with any human race, right? It's natural that there is some amount of aggression, there's some amount of indifference. The issue is the aggressive customers are vocal, and honestly, what I do is I don't entertain that. So my policy has been to keep the content and contempt separate at all points in time. I only focus on the content. I do not allow myself to or my team to be overwhelmed by the content. So yeah, so that has been my strategy. I set a separate content. If the comment has something to do with the content and not random reviews, I ask my team to take the content, reach out to people, and do that. So just to give a sense, our customer happiness score inside is 95. It is just that they are not going out and talking because it's a super large problem. And I guess that's how it is. I think it's a collective sign of how, as people or as a country, we are. And I have never been influenced by media ever. So as an individual, because they make you and break you for no good reason.
And I'm glad you mentioned the customer happiness score being at 95%. And that's a new metric for people to make a mental note of, those of you who are students attending this particular webinar. And then given that this was also new, Mr. Sahu, slowly but surely people started taking to it. They start seeing that this is working. And before you know it, new economies and industries open up, right? We're calling this the sharing economy now. It's got co-working, co-living, shared mobility, furniture rentals. These are things that millennials prefer. They don't want to, own. They instead are happy renting. Now, I want to share with you some facts here that we fished out. In November 2019, right? Ernst & Young said the sharing economy in the next 5 years will be worth $20 billion, right? And then, of course, coronavirus came visiting and, turned everything upside down. So tell us how the pandemic has affected the sharing economy with respect to real estate.
So, I'm glad that you talked about the reports and all that stuff. I guess, so honestly, my view on this has been that, look, sharing economy is an economic necessity of a poor country. I think it's not a fashionable luxury that we could do away with. So sharing is imperative because it makes most things affordable. So we have never, it's I call it dal roti over pizza, right? So pizza is fashionable, so is dal roti in a different way. So I wouldn't think, because I think the understanding of shared economy is pretty media-led today, wherein people think that it's a cool thing to do. I just think with more and more people losing jobs, I think ways of making money are going to come back, and and it may come back by people being more willing to share, to make money, and people being more willing to try a shared thing to save money. So I guess uh, I would imagine that the economics of sharing is in its best time. So I'm pretty bullish about what's going to happen to this economy in the next 5 years and next 10 years. And I'm not the guy who sort of gets into uh, the definitions of it, because I am thinking that it's not a luxury for a country like us. I think while people would want to have social distances uh, uh, in living to handle the pandemic situation well, but having a larger house means more money. That means a better job. Uh, and in this situation, we'll all fall back to basics that we know and that works for us.
It's quite heartening that you say this, because there's so much negative talk that we're getting to hear since the outbreak happened, economies crashing, so on and so forth. So you speaking positively is a shot in the arm, so to speak. So I just want to clarify, right? So what you're essentially saying is, the pandemic, and despite it, right? Segments like co-living, right, which reports indicated prior to the outbreak that it will double from almost 6.5 billion to close to 14 billion. I think Cushman and Wakefield India said this back in December. So what you're saying is, over the next 5 years, segments like co-living will continue to be positive. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I would rather want to operate us, request us to operate on a concept rather than these definitions, because definitions are super misleading. I would rather request all of the students to believe that anything that saves money or makes money uh, for individuals, because jobs are going to be far and few, or at least the perception is going to be gloomish, is actually going to take the economy further. So you'd see people renting by the hour, by the day, not because it's fashionable, just because that's the way for you to try while keeping your costs low. And the supplier will do it because he also wants to make some small money. So I would imagine that if we focus on that as a trend, and that may translate to homes, that may not translate to bikes, that may not work out for something else. As a concept, I think the media-led understanding of shared economy for me is saving money, making small money by individuals, by people, small people, not by big companies. So yeah, I think I'm pretty bullish that uh, uh, this will provide people temporary relief in the economic crisis situation, and I hope that it becomes a habit thereafter.
Yeah, so it's good to see again that you're encouraging people to rent. You're also saying that businesses offering such services, there will be plenty in it for such businesses as well. So in effect, you're talking about, a specific category of consumer behavior, right? Which encourages renting. There have been a lot of predictions that are being made in the recent past now. Bike rental businesses, they've said that people will continue to do a lot more renting of two-wheelers. The used car segment, highly unorganized, they're saying that there will be a spike because people will stop using public transportation due to social distancing. So categorically, what you're saying is the consumer behavior that propels rental markets, will sustain in the aftermath of coronavirus pandemic.
As long I am coming from the fact that it saves people money, and in a rainy situation, rainy day like this, people would want to save money. Whatever saves them money, they are going to tilt around it.
Sure. And then as customers, it's important that they tick the saving the money box, isn't it? So let me ask you to look into the crystal ball a little bit. Talk briefly about the real estate space, right? We saw Twitter, for instance, announcing just a couple of days ago that they're open to people working from home forever, right? Now, what this essentially means that people won't necessarily, move to the big cities. They don't have to move to an apartment in a big city and then travel to the office. They can work from any place as long as there's good bandwidth. So what might just happen to the real estate industry? Can you predict three big trends?
I'm not a type. I am not that type. It doesn't go well with me. But let me take a hunch at it. I guess the so you have to understand real estate industry in a slightly nuanced way, right? So the land price is the biggest cost of real estate, which has usually been super speculative. There's nothing real. It's not a productive asset, right? Uh, the it doesn't generate additional income. It's just a sort of an asset, right? So for real estate owners who own the land on their own books, right? They would be able to, because the cost of holding the land is zero to them, it's their ancestral property or so. I think they will dramatically swing prices down because they want to. Earlier they were making a bumper profit. Now they will make a small profit. So you will see real estate developers, commercial space developers who own and operate are going to report lower profits, but they will be able to sustain the economic activities. I think people who have built this business on debt capital by taking loans from banks and all that. And here is the sort of joker in the pack. You don't even know how governments are going to recast those loans. So if government recast those loans, then they may as well behave like like the guys who own the real estate. But my bet on that is low. What is going to happen is that debt capital-led commercial real estate activities are going to go down. So these are the two real estate trends. But imagine, so I'll tell you on this office euphoria that people are talking about, right? See, now if there is no office need, uh, then the job practically becomes global. Now, Nestaway sitting in Bangalore can practically hire a guy in Estonia. Hence, the people who are working, joining the workforce now, are at a bigger disadvantage even. They have to be in their own home. They have to skill themselves up to compete with somebody from Western Europe who are used to these methods. You see, so my view, employees are going to take lesser salaries to come to an office. So there are multiple trends that is going to happen now. I mean, like we have to imagine a dynamic equilibrium. It's not a static equilibrium, right? Nothing remains the same. Imagine if, like a company like Nestaway, if I could get this at the same salary 5 times more productivity, if I do not need to meet the guy, I might as well ship the job abroad. You
That's
see,
right. That's right.
so that's how the economies, the things are going to counterbalance themselves. So people would say, because we have to also be careful about how do we impact skills in people, right? So I think there is a bit of an overreaction to this entire pandemic situation. I think there are complicated taxation issues here. Like if a guy is, if I'm sending a salary to a guy in Estonia, uh, who pays income tax? So our government's willing to, you see the complications here. These are not straightforward things. I think we are trying to oversimplify because it makes a nice narrative. And I will tell you why businesses are doing it. The general and administrative expenses of businesses are in the ranges of 15 to 20%. Pandemic is an opportunity. If people can work from home, you save 10 to 15% of your expenses. So that's more profits for you guys.
That's right. So it really does change the dynamics to a large extent, isn't it? On one side, the homeowners will be happy pocketing lesser amounts of profits, but still be happy ensuring that something comes in day after day. But on the flip side, employees, you're saying, will have to needlessly upskill now because given that everyone can work remotely, jobs can be shipped overseas, right?
Yeah, I think why there will be temporary shock because I think the employability of Indian students uh, have always been in a bit of a question mark. But I think it's a good pressure to have because going forward, what pandemic did to the working class is brought forward our need to upskill ourselves by 5 years.
Right.
Right?
So, if there are students watching this particular webinar, make a mental note, please. You have to upskill big time, else your jobs will be eaten up by someone in Eastern Europe who's sitting and working from a barn, for all you know. Now, Mr. Sahu, I just want to talk a bit about some of the new areas that you've ventured into, right? Short-term rentals. And now that's a new space which is really a bit of a headache in the real estate market space. Traditionally, no one wants to rent out places for short durations. Is vacation rentals an area that you're looking at, something predominantly dominated by Airbnb? If yes, what are some of the factors that you keep in mind before rolling out such new services?
Just to clarify, we are still into long-term rentals. We are not into short-term rentals as yet. And I think so. Pre-COVID, post-COVID, there are two different worlds. And this is I always tell students, "K, never believe in what people tell you unless you feel for it." Because one COVID turned every pandit in the market to somebody whose opinions doesn't even matter, right? So Airbnb was up for a listing of a $60 billion darling of the market. Today, in 3 months' time, is in a very different shape altogether. So as a company, Nestaway, we are actually focused around owners, right? Tenants, because we think we wanted to be the asset manager of residential real estate asset class. We will follow the new use cases that would emerge in the post-COVID world. One thing that I could tell you is that people would park more and more money in land now. Because look, the stock markets in India are in shambles. The debt market is in equally poor shape. The fixed deposit rates are crashing. People, the rich in India have enough gold. They do not want to double down on the gold reserve. I think the thing that they would be worried is that, is it a good time to acquire some land if there is a company who could manage land on our behalf? So my idea is to actually implement those kind of use cases wherein we enable our homeowners to manage their real estate asset much better.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation that you make. People have enough gold; they're not going to buy any more gold. The markets are in good shape, so the thought never crossed my mind, right? So people will probably continue to invest in real estate. And you also spoke briefly about how owners and tenants are really important for you, and you've launched several new initiatives, right? Nestaway Community, Nestaway Music Lab. There's a startup lab as well. All the way from Jan 2015 to this particular standpoint, right? With all these new initiatives. Were these something that you had thought of way back then, or these initiatives is something that you've just built up along the way? Talk to us a bit about that.
Yeah, I think none of the things were there in my head in January 2015. And usually plans do not matter a lot in our business. I think what matters is, are you capable of tapping into emergent opportunities? Are you able to experiment a lot and double down on the ones that work and dispassionately kill the one that did not? So you'd keep seeing us doing way too many things as we go forward from here on.
And I think the takeaway from that is keep a good keen eye and pivot and quickly pick up on trends and start creating new opportunities. I want to talk a bit now at this stage about funding, right? You've raised over $100 million worth of funds over several rounds, right? Back in September, you raised another 5 million from Goldman Sachs. You've had investors ranging from Ratan Tata to Flipkart to Tiger Global, so on and so forth. So tell us a bit about how you caught the attention of some of these big players.
So this entire thing about entrepreneurship in India is a very glamorized thing. It's too much of glamour and very little substance. Look at under pandemic, everybody's firing. To handle it, to overcorrect it, to undercorrect it. Like a bunch of reasons, right? So what I want to tell all of you guys is that always try to build a business and never a company. And I'll tell you why. What I mean by a business is where you talk about revenues, profits, and customers. Wherein if you are thinking about starting a company, you'll talk about funding, PR, marketing, changing the world, denting the world, God knows what's all. And I guess they don't make you a better individual. I think it is pretty much like, these days what's happening in our world is people are posting a nice photo of themselves onto vacationing in a nice place on Instagram or on Facebook, and are telling the world that how cool and great their life is, irrespective of whether the life is cool or great or not. Funding to me is exactly the same. It hides a lot of structural issues. So while I come to how I did that, I also want to tell you that building great businesses, is needed when you want to build a company. Funding is not needed when you want to build a business. My request to all the students hearing this is that always try to build a business. So what I mean by a business, you end up year one, 50,000 rupees per month worth of profit in your pocket. And then hopefully you would have figured out a formula. Then raise funds to repeat that formula. What is happening is now in India is that people are building companies, and 10 years into their journey, they are trying to build businesses, which to me is a very counterintuitive way of doing things. All of you guys should build businesses first, and maybe take money to make large franchises and large companies out of it. So having funding is having a library. It necessarily does not make you wise.
That's great takeaway. Build businesses and then build companies. Now, I want to talk to you briefly, Mr. Sahu, about failure, right? You don't shy away from the fact that you founded Brisk TV before you founded Nestaway. It was the world's first cloud connected content delivery platform over TV, right? I understand that the joke doing the circles at that point of time was Brisk TV won more awards than it made revenues. So tell us a bit about that particular journey. When did you decide that that wasn't working out, and then you moved on? Some learnings along the way.
Okay, so let me tell you, answer that question. And bear with me for a minute. I'm gonna give you a slightly longer answer. So I guess this entire thing about failure, success, is linked primarily in our head with risks, right? Like, is it risky to do or not? When you talk about failure, so risk precedes failure, right? So I keep telling to students, like, if you think business, starting a business is risky, I would tell you 5, 10 more riskier things than that you do without qualms. Getting married is super risky. It's a 30 to 50 year worth of commitment. Getting kids is a 20-year worth of commitment. Taking a home loan is 10 to 20 years of commitment. Possessing a certain religious faith can also be like a lifelong commitment, which can turn fatal. So we all take those risks without qualms. I guess it has to do with the narratives around it, right? Because somehow there's a lot of nobility around getting married, starting families, taking home loans. Our parents talk about it. These are absolutely super risky things to do from a very risk perspective, right? People who understand risk in a very naked format without trying to get emotionally entangled into it. Starting a business is a 2-3 year game. It is actually less riskier than getting into your college where you are studying with money, because you may not even come out with a job. Even a pandemic can completely upset your equations, right? So if you look at startups starting up from a risk angle, it is the least risky thing to do in the scheme of things that you're anyway going to do. I would argue that getting into a full-time job is way more riskier, because it will not tell you what you're good at, and by the time you discover it, you'll be 40-50, and you'll have no choice. So if you take the risk out, then the notion of failure and success comes down drastically. Having said that, look, with Brisk TV, I think success is usually nostalgia, where failures are the real teachers, right? I think I made more mistakes. Education over TV was my intellectual arrogance talking than reality. Because I didn't follow the principles of building a business: revenues, profits, and customers. I thought that I am this guy who could build this fancy technology that the world is going to fall for. They are going to uh, reward me with everything that I wanted because I truly deserve it. Look, businesses are not magic. Nothing happens on their own. You need to be a good student who is trying to learn everything that customers are throwing at you. I miss that, and the results were, when I look in hindsight, results were obvious. And that's why maybe when I didn't make money, profits or revenues on customers, to satisfy my ego, maybe I doubled down on awards. Like, it's not that awards found me; I must have applied. So I guess it's a question of what stories are you telling yourself? Like, are you into business to provide a service, make a living for you, or are you into a business to prove that the world deserves to respect you? The world has no business. World doesn't care a fuck, honestly. It actually doesn't care. So we all go on our own unique journeys. So it is to our best interest to listen to the world and navigate accordingly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a couple of takeaways there, if I can quickly summarize. Products, revenues, and customers, right? Three pillars that you spoke of running a successful business. You also said that starting a business is less riskier than probably getting married. Very quickly, Mr. Sahu, a lot of students here, future job aspirants, uh, can you share with them top three qualities that you look for when you hire employees at Nestaway?
I think, Rahul, this is the biggest fallacy. As a student, you have so much of life left to yourself. Don't submit to the whims and fancies of a random employer. Never, ever, ever submit yourself. The colleges, the schools, the teachers, the parents, everybody tells you that, to get a, see, the purpose of life is not to get a job. And you are just starting. You should, my request to you, pandemic is a blessing in disguise. All of you should try to start a business. All of you. T-shirt selling, trinket selling, selling sodas on the road, all of them are equally fascinating because they will teach you the basic qualities to earn a dignified living. You get tired, you get bored, then go get a job. So the qualities that I look for is uh, as an employer, obedience, loyalty. I do not want you to get any of them. Honestly, if I were you, I'm not talking as the CEO of Nestaway. I'm talking you as somebody who has gone through this journey. I want you to build a strong view that I can make 50,000 rupees a month on my own, and I do not need to submit myself to the whims and fancies of wearing this shoe, that color, that meeting, this meeting, appearing, making presentations that I don't believe in, talking things that I don't believe in. So the the cost of making a mistake is the lowest now for all of you guys, and it is the lowest that will ever be in your life. So you go and tell your parents that because of pandemic I didn't get a job, and it's a perfectly acceptable thing to say now. But use this time to go and build a business for you. Like, come to me and tell me, Amar, I wanted to run a fully functional brokerage store for you in Madhya Pradesh. What do you have for me? Don't come and ask me, Amar, I want a job, because I do not want jobs. While they teach you a thing, uh, entrepreneurship or any business teaches you 20 things together. So I think a year in business is 5 years of job put together. And
Sure.
today, this is the time for you guys. So asking me what I look for, don't submit to my whims and fancies.
That's entirely new perspective as well, right? Start early. Probably now is the best time to start. You're saying, and also you're saying don't submit to the whims and fancies of your bosses, probably, right? So this is absolute gold, Mr. Sahu. I'm sure the students are loving this bit of insight. Now, final question to you: tell us all what you love about your job on a day-to-day basis.
I actually love the fact that I want to beat IBM, man. I want to create 3 lakh jobs in India. That's my goal. So I love the fact I count how many new employees, and not just employees. And I am now trying to convert my employees into business partners. Like, you run this business, like, because this is a skill that this country needs. Like, I come from a background. Like, if I could do it, all of you guys could do it. Like, remember I went to a local school, 2 rupees a month school, and I'm like most of you are into a private institution. I'm sure a good amount of your parents will be wealthy and they could actually afford to take care of you for a year. Look, sorry, just before I say that, I am not known to say politically correct things. So, so I am sure that. So with that caveat, most of your parents can take care of you for 2 more years because a lot of them would already be pushing you to go abroad to get into high studies or do fancy things, and it's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. Now you have 2 years. Go ask your parents that the money that you ever thought would give me, now start giving me a salary, 10,000, 15,000 rupees a month, and go chase your dreams. So I am exactly doing the same thing to my employees. I am saying if safety of some income is of superior importance to you, let me offer that to you. All of you should start side businesses so that in next 10 years, if I could create 3 lakh jobs uh, through the network of Nestaway, uh, I would sip my morning tea or coffee with a lot more pride.
And that's good to hear as well. So you're looking to create about 3 lakh jobs in India. And all of these employees, based on what you said, are welcome to knock on your door and say, hey, Mr. Sahu, I want to do something new. So that's fantastic to hear. So let's, on that note, we're almost out of time. In fact, we are a few minutes over our allocated time as well. But quick takeaways, several in fact, stay positive, identify the skills that are inherent to you and try and turn that into a business. The economy will bounce back, right? Soak in as much positivity as possible. Learn to sell a whole lot more that you've shared with us. And thank you so much for participating, all the students and the rest of the attendees. And Mr. Sahu, uh, this was fantastic. Thank you for your candor through this entire conversation. And on that note, we will end this particular session. This was the Black Book Thought Leader Speaker Series, the episode that focused on sharing economies tryst with real estate. Follow us on the Instagram feed and on YouTube. Thanks once again, Mr. Sahu, and all the attendees for being part of this discussion. Until next time, we'll see you. Stay safe and goodbye.